Let's look at some of the software that you're going to need. Now, with any type of web development, you're definitely going to need a web server. Now, when we're working with PHP, you're going to be working with databases and web design type work. Everything is going to center around that web server. Now, you can use Apache or IIS. Apache is similar to IIS. They're both web servers. The main difference is IIS is geared towards Microsoft-specific technologies, and Apache is cross-platform and usually paired with PHP and MySQL. Now, IIS is the Microsoft Internet Information Server, and you can use PHP with Apache or IIS. Now, on the Windows machine, you can use IIS or Apache, it doesn't matter. Apache is the standard because it is cross-platform, and the folks that created PHP specifically like to target their code for use on the open source Apache web server. Now, with a local and a remote, now what I mean by local and remote is you're going to have to develop everything on a local machine or even a local server, and then remotely, that's where you're going to publish things, and that's going to be out for everybody to see, but this is going to be your production server. So locally, you might have a development and or a testing server as well. Now, you will need PHP, PHP 4 or PHP 5. Now, the samples that you have here, they cover PHP 4 and PHP 5. There are differences between the two, but they're very compatible, meaning that PHP is very backwards compatible up to a certain degree, of course. It's not going to overstep way back to PHP 3, but you get the idea. PHP 4 is really the standard. PHP 5 isn't really considered a stable production, mission-critical type thing that a lot of hosting companies are still centering with PHP 4. They're waiting for certain things to be taken care of course, so you have to check with your hosting provider to see if PHP 5 is going to be supported. We will be covering code that is compatible with PHP 4 and PHP 5. And you can visit php.net to download, first of all, the PHP source code or the binaries, and you can definitely get a lot of great information from php.net. Now, if you want to do any type of database work, you're going to need a database. Now, standard is to work with MySQL. 4.x, we'll talk a little bit more about what you're going to need for that. And you can go to mysql.com and you can download those for your operating system as well. PHP 4, PHP 5, any PHP flavor, and MySQL, everything's open source here, including the Apache. And everything is very cross-platform, so you can pick your operating system for the most part. And then you're going to need a PHP text or web editor. Now, the examples that we have here, we're going to be using Dreamweaver to show those examples. That's only because I really enjoy the what you see is what you get. That's going to be excellent for being able to train and to show you the examples and things like that. It also is very good for beginners who are used to PHP or anybody who's using PHP, but we'll talk about other editors that you can use. Other optional software could be things like Php Myadmin. Php Myadmin is a tool that allows you to administer your database locally or over the web directly within a web browser, which is a really great way to work with your MySQL databases, a web application that you can install on a web server. You want to keep that locally. Probably you don't want to put it into a production environment unless you're using a hosting company where they have a lot of time invested in security, for example, but we'll take a look at that. We're going to use that. PHP has a lot of open source solutions that are already written, and you can just basically install them, work within the license scheme, and you're ready to go. Now, of course, you're going to need to pick an operating system. So the good news is the big three are supported: Linux, Windows, or Mac OS, and this is going to be for all of these solutions here, outside of IIS, of course. And we're going to concentrate on Windows, but we'll also work with some Mac OS. Maybe you have Linux or Linux on your production server that's out on the web because you use a hosting provider. You can also use a hosting provider for Windows or Mac OS, and it's really great. So you can mix and match when you're talking about your local and your remote servers and how you develop things. When you're working with PHP or Apache, you might come across this particular name here, LAMP. LAMP is really just an acronym for the open source solution of Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And that is LAMP. There are other flavors, of course. Somebody came along and made WAMP, which is a Windows version of that, and you can put Apache with Windows, like I mentioned. Works great. We're actually going to install something called WAMP Server, which takes all that code together, puts it into a nice install routine. There are other flavors, like for Mac, for example. Then you just put that M there and it's MAMP. Whatever you want to pronounce there, it's up to you. But then you're dealing with the Mac. And then there's XAMPP. And that is really any operating system or different flavors of operating systems. You're dealing with Apache MySQL and PHP, and oftentimes Perl. It takes all the source code, all the binaries, all those different folders, and it just manages it very, very nicely for you in a nice install. So, my advice to you is use whatever floats your boat. So what I mean there is just use what is going to get the solution done for you. That's important. All right, so all that being said, we don't want to confuse you too much with a lot of slides and things like that. We definitely want to get a lot of hands-on things in the training, but I think it's important for you to know where exactly to download everything. Now, I told you before that you have to deal with Apache and MySQL and download it from php.net or mysql.com. Well, you can get wampserver.com. Put that /en/ if you want the English version. Otherwise, you'll get the French version. You want to go there and you want to actually download that package. Download the latest stable package. WAMP is only available on the Windows platform. And also go into the add-on section and get the PHP 4 add-on. I think it's really great to do that. Then you can switch between PHP 4 and PHP 5. It's Windows only. But this is what we're going to be installing and working with for the most part when we deal with Windows. Now, XAMPP. This is from the great people over at ApacheFriends.org. Again, use the EN English because this is really a worldwide thing in many different languages. So you just want to put in that EN there just so you don't get confused. Now, you can have the downloads there for Mac or Windows or Linux. Mac is in beta currently as of February 2005, so you want to take a look at that. Then there's MAMP, and that's mamp.info. Again, English, not a final again, but if you're on Mac, you want to check that out. Definitely much easier than installing it yourself. It's very, very friendly. Then we have the Php Myadmin Net. This is where you get that source code to do the MySQL administration from a web app, and that's going to be installed in your PHP folder. Now, WAMP is going to have Php Myadmin in there, so you don't have to worry about it. XAMPP as well. Also note that extra P there, here at the end. Well, that stands for Perl, and that's going to be installed there as well. Perl oftentimes is a nice thing to use when you're dealing with PHP and Apache solutions. And then if you want to do it individually, well, apache.org, mysql.com, and php.net. All the details I'm giving you here is information you can use to decide what environment you want to use PHP in. I would strongly recommend you use WAMP on Windows because everything you need is installed right away for you. On the Mac, I encourage you to follow the instructions I give you for installing and setting up the software. MAMP is still in beta, and I don't currently use this package. Downloading and installing the software individually is much harder and will require that you thoroughly read and understand the installation documentation that comes with each software package. The install packages I describe here will help to shield you from actually having to edit advanced configuration files. So a lot of information. Here's where we wrap it up. I just want to talk about the versions that you're going to need or that could be very, very good for you. Now, Apache comes in the 1.3.33, very, very stable mission critical type thing, and then Apache 2.0. Now, not everybody considers Apache 2.0 an extremely stable environment. It just is the case that Apache 1.3.33 is extremely stable, and it really is up to what you need. Depends on what my hosting provider supports, because they don't want to have a lot of phone calls. They want your websites to stay up as much as possible. You get a lot of 99.95% up accuracy as far as your servers being up. Well, we want to get to 100%, so this is why they do that. Now, with MySQL, you want to go with 4.1.x. This is the latest at the moment, and you want to watch out for security issues. So you always want to keep an eye on MySQL and getting that installed correctly to the latest levels. Now, with PHP 4.3, you're going to want that at least, but 0.1 is definitely where you want to be at. So if your hosting provider doesn't have 4.3.1, you want to definitely get a word into them and tell them, hey, we want to support the most stable, secure way of working with PHP. If you work here, you're great. And with PHP 5.03 is currently the latest. But again, all these numbers are relative to the time that you actually watch the videos. So you want to keep an eye on that. So I don't want to say 4.3.1 and then tomorrow there's this huge worm or something like that. So don't hold me to that because everything changes. Everything is relative to the time period. So anyway, all that being said, you want to consult with your hosting company. And that's always the best thing to do. This is very, very good advice. It takes a lot of time to go around and find all of this. So I think it's really, really helpful for you. And you can use it as you need to. We're going to talk more about what we have installed and things like that and what we're using and compatibility issues and things like that as we work through the training.